For Our Soil's Sake is brought to you by Holistic Management Canada. My hope is to feed our souls by having meaningful conversations with farmers, producers, and experts in agriculture to get a greater understanding of management practices that mitigate climate change, improve water quality, build soil health, and enhance habitat and biodiversity on agricultural landscapes. To give those of us who live in the city a better understanding of how what we consume directly affects our health and the health of the land. My name is Bronwyn Green, and I'll be your host. So for our soil's sake, let's dig right in. Thank you for tuning into the show today. Joining us, we have Trevor Atchinson from Poplarview Stock Farm. Poplarview is a cattle farm in Findlay, Manitoba. And this past summer, he was involved in the Holistic Management Canada's Accelerator program. And that program sets out to speed up the adoption of regenerative agriculture practices here in Manitoba. So Trevor's here today to share his experience in the program, tell us his farm story. Welcome, Trevor. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, glad to be here.
Awesome. Did you want to start off by saying just a little bit about yourself?
I can do that. So I am Trevor Atchinson we live right across from the sort of abandoned town site of Findlay. Pipestone is our address, our closest small village, I guess. Poplarview Stock Farm has been in operation in the family since 1900. And it still involves my parents, are still involved. Myself, my wife Melissa, our two children Reese and Wyatt, who are 10 and 9. Wyatt just turned, and my nephew works with us full time. He has some cows here. He recently bought some land, and then I have two sisters, a brother-in-law, and a niece. My niece she's worked for me over the years, but she's still involved on processing days and helping me with computer tracking of the cattle and whatnot. So yeah, it's still very much a family affair whenever help is needed.
Yeah.
Then we encompass about 5,500 deeded acres, and then we rent another like 3,500, 4,000 acres on pastures. It changes when you lease or don't lease land. Running about 750 cows, and we grass some yearlings on top of that. We're kind of in a sand hills and hay flats is what we tell people where we are. We go for pretty light sandy soil. And then right into, we border lots of our own, some marshland, periodic to flooding, or some annually, some severe on high water years type thing. So that's sort of what keeps us in, mainly being a cattle operation, is the soil type and the productivity level of it and the adversity of it.
Right. So I was under the impression that you have quite a few different enterprises going on your farm. So you have the cattle aspect. Do you have other enterprises like horses and things like that? Or
My wife and daughter have horses.
okay,
just for pleasure. And then we also grain farm, we probably seeded, 900 acres or 800 acres this spring. Some is just straight cash crop. Probably half of it was silage, some corn, and then some mixed cereals. We also do a bit of custom haying, put up a lot of our own hay. We do sell some beef off, I guess you call it direct farm marketing. Do some of that. So that, we do, like I said, we do a bit of custom haying. My nephew has a truck. He custom hauls silage in the summertime and a bit of hay and whatnot, as time allows through the winter.
Right. Do you guys direct market your beef?
We do. Yep. It's all sold as, quarters, sides or full beef. We were doing a little bit like 25 years before, prior to BSE, we were doing a little bit. And then we started with family members, mostly after the fallout of BSE. Okay. And it's just kind of grown from there till it's like, I think we must be probably 25 head or so, this year. So out of our whole, business of cows is not a lot, but it certainly is a sideline that we've never really actively advertised or pursued it. It's all been by word of mouth, and it just kind of keeps growing, as family members or their friends are over and eat some, or as the families have grown up. So now their kids are gone and married type thing. So that's sort of how it's expanded for us.
That's so cool. Did you grow up on this farm?
Yep. Yeah. I've never lived anywhere but here, I guess, in my life. I did work out a little bit out of school, but I've been, um, yeah, here since I was born. My father and grandfather both were born
Nice.
and raised here. My great grandfather moved from. They were Canadian, like he was born in Canada. They moved from Ontario.
Okay.
Yeah, when we were just recently, my kids, I guess maybe that was early September. They had to do a ethnicity or national trace where were your roots from, and I said, well, we're been Canadian a long time around here.
Nice. That's so cool. Did you always know that you wanted to farm?
Yeah, pretty much, I guess. And, I always had a great interest in it as a kid with my parents or whatever. So it just, yeah, was always a fit for me.
Cool. Is it like your number one passion, or do you have any other passions or things that you like to do?
No, it is probably the number one thing for sure. Um, it just probably the recent years it's taking more focus maybe than it should. Um, Trying to retain full time employees or even enough part time ones has been a struggle. So that puts more of the load on the owners of people that are here to do more, and it cuts into time. It uses it all up, I guess, is the way to put it. Unfortunately, but yeah, we continually to work on that to try to get full time long term help. But it's just been a struggle for the last few years.
How are you getting that help? Like, do you reach out to the smaller towns around you? Is it all just through connections of people you know, trying to find somebody who lives in the area that could be reliable?
Yes, all of those. We did use a program this year called Young Agrarians. Um, we've never looked into foreign worker program. We are, I guess, or have off and on. Never got to that point. But yeah, we've had a number of young kids work for us over the years out of school. Some out of province. Had a girl from Australia for a 8 or 10 month stint one year. Um, so yeah, we've always kind of keep our ear out for somebody, young kids or whatever that want to work. But there's just less of rural kids as there used to be, and uh, you know non cattle farming, grain farming is somewhat more appealing at times
Yeah,
for people, and it's just tough to compete with that. And yeah, with being less kids around, it's difficult to find them like we once did.
right. Yeah. And like just to do a little plug here for the listeners, what are some of the qualities or qualifications are you looking for someone that would be qualified to come work on your farm? Like, are you looking for like a farm hand or someone to actually help manage an enterprise with you? Or
Probably either or. We're pretty open. The biggest thing is somebody that's willing to work, and you know not long hours every day, but there are days when it's you're there for 16 or 18 hours when we're processing or those kind of things, and then when it's go time we're going, and so willing to to put those days in. Not expected every day to be like that, but sometimes you really need them, and then willingness to learn or you know adapt to new things and be able to um, you know learn a new skill and be able to handle it on their own, in a relatively quickly manner, I guess. I don't like to be too critical, but I know we've had people come that you get them started and you train them, and 3 weeks in you're still showing them the same task, and it gets to be cumbersome for me or my nephew who's trying to help them. That we need to be. The idea is we're supposed to be moved on to something else, so we try to put when we're advertising or looking for people, we try to be a little more scrutinize just a little bit, just because we want somebody. Our goal is that we're going to show them, and they're going to be doing it on their own in a matter of reasonable time once they feel comfortable with the task. But yeah, if we're any extra experience, mechanical, cattle handling, welding. I mean, that's all a bonus, I guess you'd
right.
say.
Mhm.
Um, but we're willing to work with anybody that wants to work and learn.
Right, give someone a little bit of the training and teaching, and then help hope that they'd be self-efficient so that they could
Right. Yep.
do the task, and then you could
Yeah,
focus on
and I mean
it.
you're still working with other people as time goes on, but there's lots of days where there's lots of jobs that they will be doing on their own, and that's we'll put a plug in for young agrarians, but that's sort of what drew me to that is that they're searching for people or people that are looking for that kind of an atmosphere who have little or no agriculture experience but want to learn and are willing to.
Yeah,
It gives them a platform to really showcase what they want to learn and that they can and are willing to, and it helps somebody like me find candidates that are really interested in it.
absolutely. Yeah, and for those who don't know, I did a little introduction session a while back, but I actually was a part of the Young Agrarian program 2 years ago, and
Okay.
that's what I did. So
Yep.
I had an interest in agriculture and being a part of that world, but I have no family in it, and I also didn't know if I was even capable of it, like if I had the strength, willpower, all of it to be able to do it. So I applied for the program, and yeah, they matched me with a farm and farmers, and it was quite an experience, and it is a great opportunity for people who don't have any connections to it to get into it. But I noticed that everybody that was in my group, they were very eager and hardworking people. So I think it's a pretty awesome program for both of us, for me and a farmer like you who's looking for not necessarily a load of experience, but an eagerness to learn.
Yep. Eager. That's a good word, Bronwyn. Eagerness is yeah. That's probably something I'll use in the future. I think that one.
Nice. Yeah. Those descriptive words I've learned for like hiring, that it's like that's like what do you appreciate about yourself? And it's like someone who's eager, who like wants to take it on. You
Yep.
don't want to feel like you're dragging them through it.
Exactly, because you can show them a task and they're going to go do it for you. But if it's not something, if they absolutely detest it, they're going to look for something else or not stay or those kind of things. And you hate, if you hire somebody, for a stint, like for 2 months or a select period, you hate to make them stay. At least I do if it's not really what they want to do. So finding someone that's eager to learn about agriculture, even if they decide when they're done that, what, I don't want to do that, I want to get a 9 to 5 job in an office. That's fine if they give it their all and give it a good try.
Right, totally. Cool. So when like I don't know if you necessarily would you classify your farm as a regenerative farm, or I know that you have had a little bit of part with the holistic management. How long has that been a part of your farming practices?
Well, I guess it's just because of the land, the soil type we have right back to my grandfather, where, you know, before my time, but even when my dad, my grandpa was still alive, but my dad was running the place. He was into no till or zero till like in the early 90s before a lot of people were. And as a small cattle farmer, it was, equipment was, new tech was new back then, but it was expensive. So, it was hard to justify the cost. But he went out and purchased his own, different types of drills and, quit working the land. And prior to that, my grandfather, the neighbors were still all plowing the fields every fall, and he had, quit that. Um, you know, those kind of things. Always had a lot of forage, alfalfa, hay type pastures that they rotated, would break them up for a few years and put back to grass. And anything, that was not suitable for farming was sowed to grass almost before my time and has been left that way.
Okay.
Um, so I don't know whether I'd use the term regenerative or not. I mean, but we've certainly always, been tried to do what's best for the land, I guess. And, as a kid, I never got to miss school to do farm work very much, but if there was land blowing, I mean, that's you got still from school and haul manure or spread straw or something on the land, and that's just sort of been we take that over everything we do. I mean, we've been feeding cows out on the land, like not in our main herd for all my life until the snow got too deep, because back then the equipment wouldn't get around it. Once we had tractors that would get through the snow, I mean, we haven't had the cow sort of on a manure pack per se for 30 years likely or more. Um, so it was just sort of things that have always been adapted here, I guess. And then, so, the regenerative stuff now we're moving that into our cropping thing more so than we had been, I guess. So that is, that is new, or it's 4 or 5 years old for us. I guess we've been trying it, but,
Okay.
um, I had tried other things, intercropping years ago and didn't have much success. Different varieties and whatnot now are allowing that to come through, and at least make you want to try it again type thing. So,
Right.
yeah, whether I term us that way or not, or just sort of long term, trying to be sustainable or whatever has always been that's been our goal or our almost, when I was a kid, it was almost a mandate from, you know, my father or the, people that were dealing with it, that was um, just what you did, right? It was just
Right.
practice.
Right. That was just farming.
Yeah, for us, that was, I mean, the pack cows were, they were used to graze in pastures longer than they do now. But I mean, even 30, 40 years ago, the cows were still, you know, they were maybe in paddocks long, but they were still rotated somewhat through the summer. Like it was just the norm around here.
Right. Do you so I know that you guys have cash crops. Do you have the cows ever like graze the crop after you take it off? Are
Yep,
you able to
most
incorporate
times we
them?
graze the stubble or straw or whatever. Um, with our low acres, I've never. A long time ago, we had a neighbor do some combining that had a chaff collector, but that's a long time ago. So because our low acres and the nobody local has any equipment that would collect chaff or those kind of things for us, we've never invested in the equipment to deal with it to do it, just because we didn't think we had the acres to justify it.
Mhm.
Um, So we have done some, but minimal, just because of equipment we have or have access to, I guess.
Right. Okay. And so did you take a holistic management course ever or go to
Yep,
any of the conferences? Okay.
yep. My parents and I took it like 90 late 90s or early 2000s. I can't even remember. I should have looked that up before this,
Awesome.
but
Oh,
it's
that's
a long.
okay.
Yep, it's a while ago. Took it. Yeah,
One of
we
the
took it with
original groups.
we were a little later because there was some prior to that
Yeah.
was a longer running one in Manitoba, but we were, there was a group of them that started, 10 years before that. And then we were, ahead of a lot of the ones that have developed since, I guess.
Okay. And do you still keep in contact with any of those people in your group?
No, not in a formal holistic group. A lot of them are retired.
Oh, okay.
Like, I bet you we're down. Maybe there's children of a couple that are still operating, but it's a lot of them are. Yeah, there's three, four of us out of the original whatever we had, 10 or 11, that are still farming, and I think even the one, it's him and his wife are still there, but it's his son is doing more and more all the time.
Okay.
So yeah, that's just sort of how how it ended up. And then we looked at becoming part of another groups and whatnot, and they were sort of full at that time, and I think they're kind of in the same boat now too. That they've
Right.
had enough retire or whatever, that they're not as active as they were.
Right. Did you and your wife create a holistic context? Do you guys have a context that you refer back to when you're making all your decisions on the farm? So kind of like almost an intention on or like a quality of life of how you want your farm to exist and be, and do you guys have one of those written up that you check in on once in a while?
We not the joint one. We one was done prior to us, to our marriage, and then it's just sort of ingrained, in that um, what's best for me, the environment, and the family. Those, just kind of going over those things and sticking with that. I guess keeping it, keeping the, you know, it's maybe not simple the way you're scrutinizing whatever decision you're making, but it's keeping the number of things you run it past minimal to start with, before you start delving into it any deeper. I guess, if that, I don't know if that
Right.
makes sense, but yeah,
No,
keeping it,
totally.
right off the bat, is just, is it going to work, make us better or worse, and kind of build on adding the testing questions from there.
Right. The quality of your life, your family's life, and the land, of
Yep,
course. Right.
yep.
That's awesome. Okay. How come you applied for the regenerative program, the accelerator program?
I guess the ability for the verification progress, or maybe not, just to see, um, I guess, to see what it was going to do or prove or be about, not even looking so much as what's going to be, what it's going to show on my place, but the ability for them, the program, to have access to land that's been under different management practices, to hopefully give them data, I guess, long term. Whether I get much out of it or not is was less relevant than seeing if the whole, they can make a system, that
Yeah,
works.
totally.
This carbon credit and this, that stuff is always out there and coming at us, and it's it's fairly obvious that nobody, especially on pasture grasslands, has a system that's going going to allow grass, farmers to benefit from these programs at this point in time. It looks so anything that can gather data to help build on that was a positive for me. I mean, the incentive of the funding with it wasn't that was also part of it.
Yeah,
Um,
not gonna say no to the money.
no, not going to say no to that, especially the way the cattle business has been the last few years. And then allowing with young agrarians, and our agrarian got to go with you a little bit, so just give her exposure to it. So that was the other part of it, was to allow them, that whoever, because I don't even think we knew who that person was going to be then, but
Right.
allow them the ability to learn something new about what was happening. And because I mean, it is the process of gathering the samples is relatively not new, but what was being done with it, um, you know, for the outcome, it was new, I guess, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so some of our listeners might know from the other interviews, what we did and what was part of the program. So, the farmer's given a grant so that they can implement a project. They're also given a mentor to help plan the project, as well as the EOV monitoring. So that's like us monitoring the ecology of the land. And so a lot of it is actually observational. So we go around and monitor all the pastures, to see how the ecosystem processes are functioning, as well as we're taking soil samples to find out how much carbon's being sequestered into the soil. And so, yeah, just from going around your farm, it's so large and so beautiful. You could see the difference just from one pasture to another, what's happening underneath the grass and with the soil. You're seeing the difference in the sandy soils, maybe the more watery soil. And so then we'll kind of gather all this database and create a report for Trevor to have so that he can work off every year. But also, the larger picture is that the data is going into the Savory Institute hub. And they have hubs all across the world. And everyone's gathering this similar data and putting it into this platform. And then we're able to see on a larger scale, what's happening with the ecology of like the world almost and all these different spots. And so, that's helping to create new systems and things like that for farmers. So it's all happening right now at the same time in different places. And so that's kind of the data that Trevor was talking about that would contribute to the larger picture. And so it's very helpful when we have farmers like Trevor, who have like this diverse landscape that we can test and monitor, and then use it to reference back when we need to. So that's awesome. Okay. What was the project? Did you guys decide on a project yet that you were implementing with that money?
um, we had lots of a fairly widespread one. We were doing some internal cross fencing and a bit of a water project. Um, and then we were looking at doing some shelter belt planting, and still we just time wise we didn't get the shelter belt sites prepped this fall. I just was talking to our local conservation district will or do the I guess sorry that their watershed districts now. Um, will be they plant the trees still for us, and I haven't got in touch with him his thought is on not having the site prep, whether we bump that a year or not. Um,
Okay.
just because we were short of help, had some help leave us through the summer, so that left us shorthanded and prioritized. We just didn't get there, so we're hoping that we can still do some of that. Next year, at least get a start on and plant the trees the next year, whatever it might be. But so that was sort of our, was a more cross fencing, internal, another a water system to be able to spread the paddocks out and maybe keep the cattle out of the dugouts at part of the time, and then
Great.
increase some shelter belt protection long term.
Nice. So one of the other farms mentioned that they were using some of the money to build a shelter belt, and I was just hoping that you could explain to those listening who don't have any farming experience what a shelter belt is and why is that important? Like, what's the relevance of planting these trees?
Okay, yep. So we are recording this on November the 15th or 17th or something, and with the number of cows we have, we like to keep them out extensive, in pastures as much as we can. So um, I'll use today as an example. The wind's blowing at about 30, gusting to 50 kilometers an hour, and the temperature is minus 10 or 12 with, creating a wind chill. So um, we like to have shelter belts, which to provide protection for cow herds, cattle herds, whatever we're doing to be able to allow us to graze or feed or wherever we want. And the shelter belt would consist of, minimum one row, usually multiple rows, 2, 3 rows of trees, some tall towering, some short shrubbier ones, and then even a shrub in the bottom for, to reduce that wind speed at the ground level and maybe trap some snow off, especially if you want an area where you're, going to keep cattle longer term or whatever it might be. Um, so yeah, they help trap snow to collect moisture for one thing, and then reduce the wind for the cattle livestock to be pastured out. And I mean, we try to, like I said, we try to keep them out. And winter's sort of been here for a week, but as time goes on, you have cattle out and you get a couple of cold, windy days. Instead of us having to bring them back somewhere to shelter, it's nice to be able to leave them where they are. So even if you have a couple of paddocks on a pasture system that have some shelter, you can move them over there for those stormy days. Even if you got to feed them for a couple of days, then they can go back out grazing after. So that's sort of our long term use of them, is to reduce, to provide wind protection, environmental protection for livestock, I guess. And the last ones we planted through it's been a few years now. We have planted them where they have different, they recommend different trees, fruit bearing trees or whatnot, as the shrub in the bottom, to provide different wildlife habitat, species, food sources or whatnot. So that's the added benefit to it, I guess, or unseen one for me. But yeah, the goal is to provide, shelter for cattle long term.
Right. And how was last year? I was just looking at your Instagram right before popping up here and saw that in April when we had that giant snowstorm that your cattle were okay. Did you last year with all the snow, did you guys have to bring them in at all, or were they able to be out on pasture for most of the winter?
No, they were out. Our cattle are almost always extensive, like out on a pasture field of some sort. We through the main winter months we bale graze, or we feed them bales in rows, and then move a portable fence, every day, every third day, whatever the rotation or ration might call for. So we did have them out. We were lucky they were on land that accessed our home place last year, thankfully. The snow did make it challenging, just because some of the bales would be almost buried in snow drifts, and walking around them makes it more difficult. But we also use a number of portable wind shelters that we can move along the field to give the cattle protection where they are. So that helped a lot. And as the later storms, when those really bad blizzards come, we had access to a large area of fairly solid, dense bush. So for those days, we just open a gate, move the cows into that bush for the 3 or 4 days of the storm, and then they go back out to their regular, bale grazing system after the storm. So once again, it's those shelter belts that we're looking at planting. You can use the windbreaks and those trees in a real bad storm to give that extra bit of protection from them.
Right. Okay. And and the bale grazing, I was getting really into a conversation with somebody about bale grazing, and they're noticing some significant improvements around the bales in the spring or even the following year. So not necessarily the spring after that winter, but a year later, seeing different species and things growing back from the bale grazing. Have you noticed some improvements in those areas?
For sure. I mean, the amount of nutrients, and basically we feed, last year especially, we were dry in this part of the world, extremely dry. So we fed some feedstuffs that were, they had quality feed in it, but when you're baling, swampland, we had a lot of bales with rough material, cattails, bulrushes that the cattle, it's edible to some point, but not all of it. So we had a lot of waste. So that leaves a lot of thatch, which eventually turns into soil. And yeah, we've been, if not bale grazing per se as we are now, we were still bale grazing. We just hauled the bales out and placed them, for a week at a time feeding. You go back the next year, the 3 years following, and look at what's growing there prior to when you fed on it. And I mean, it's amazing that the amount of growth that comes, especially if it's a really played out pasture or really sandy. I mean, you can get a major increase in growth, period,
Yeah.
plus different species. I mean, it does have a undesired effect if when you have a lot of thatch like we did last year, you have a lot of bare spots. Um, and then that'll of course leaves bare ground. You get some weeds that'll grow around the edge of those spots. But I mean, when you graze it, they'll either tramp them down or they graze them. But once the grass starts coming back, um, and thriving again, it chokes those annual weeds out without much.
Absolutely.
without much issue. But so yeah, we certainly have seen an improvement in our pastures. There's like I said all along since we've been feeding out, whether bale grazing or the way we used to do it prior. Um, like you can't. We everything here has been under rotational grazing of some sort almost forever, but
Yeah.
it's fairly much more intense for 20 years now. But winter feeding on it can move your you know improvement to the soil and forage production from grazing. You can advance that 3, 5, 10 times with feeding on that land. It's showing you sort of how much depleted it has been over its life, or just the fact in our case, I think where we're on pretty light. I mean, there's like some places there's like 6 inches, maybe a foot, 2 feet of brown sand on top of yellow sand, and if you can add a couple of inches of fairly black dirt from the thatch, the leftover material degrading into soil, it's amazing how you change that soil on top. So
Right. So much
makes it
more can grow on that. A lot of people are concerned about the soil sand, like the sandy soils. But then if you can break down that thatch, it turns into organic matter. And then it's almost like a pretty great habitat for new plants to grow.
for sure. And I think we're I've been to enough holistic management meetings, conferences, tours over the years, and I've been in areas where they call their environment brittle. So my area isn't called brittle on the scale because we vary from swamp to whatever, but we certainly have areas that are maybe more brittle environment. So that's dry, poor growth. Um, Plants are easily damaged from overgrazing or overtramping because it takes longer to recover on that dry soil. That's sort of the scale in it. So when you feed on those, you don't like to be, making it a manure pack because you don't want to change it faster than the soil underneath can support it, I guess you'd say. But um, we're, we're basically hopefully taking that sandy soil and making it someday it'll be a loamier soil, right? With the added organic matter, because that's basically what sand is lacking is organic matter. You can add that to it and make it better soil over time, right? That's the goal. And you can certainly see you see more bugs, you see more birds. We get skunks or different animals that they'll root around. Obviously, they're finding grubs, bugs, worms, whatever in that where that thatch is. You'll see them digging around through it where you don't see that where it's that's just the normal production area. So it's it can be quite amazing, especially if you get a year where you winter feed or bale graze and get decent moisture. Last year, and then the year previous where we fed. I mean, if I took you to that field, it looks like a mess yet, just because when you have a dry year following, I mean, the thatch it just seems to it lays there dormant, right? It can't decay fast enough.
Right.
Um, and yeah. So you run into those things, but I always say the productivity you lose on those bare spots for 1, 2 years is you easily get double that back once that grass fills in those spots and starts growing.
Right, it's the long game, and that's what people were seeing. They were seeing that they would bale graze, and then they'd get bare ground, which is like a scary thing, and then weeds would come up from that because that's the first thing to come up. But
Right.
they're easily stomped out and eaten by the animals over the next couple years, and that gives enough time for the other seeds and grasses to come up and grow.
Yep, for sure. That's yep, exactly. And it is, if you've never done it before, because we'd fed out for so long, we've had bare spots in our life before, and the grass comes back. Eventually, you just let it do its thing,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's just a just a symptom of what you're doing, I guess. That and these dry years, this year we, because it was wet here, this we have less of that rough waste in each bale of hay that you won't get, won't have that much in the wintertime. But over long term, that all that leftover mass, like if you have 1,000 pound bale and there's 300, 400 pounds of, or sorry, 1,000 pounds of good hay, and the bale has 300 or 400 pounds of waste in it that they don't eat or whatever. I mean, you're leaving that on a spot that's going to turn into soil basically over time, and
Yeah.
that's just a benefit. No way around it. It's just that it benefits the whole system.
Awesome. That's so cool. They Okay, my next question is kind of like a fun one. If you had an endless amount of money, resources, and time, what would you do? What would you change about your farm?
Well, I guess this is probably when we're so busy weaning calves and whatnot, probably a bad time to ask me because I'd probably sell it all and sit with my feet up somewhere in a warmer climate. But I guess um, having the uh, ability to deal with on a physical scale, something, whether it's you replace a piece of equipment or you redo some fencing so you don't have those issues of a cow, something crawling the fence. To that would in turn give you more time, right? Time's always the thing that you're short of, um, and that happens here when we run short of help. That the family life suffers from it, or maybe it doesn't. It's just different. The kids come with dad or whatever it is. You get that quality time too, but it just makes things certain times a year, especially rushed. You're constantly on the go, and being able to do it at a lesser pace, and that you would be. So yeah, you would make your lifestyle simpler. You can do the same thing with a lot less effort, time, and you know I always use when I'm asked this question, I use the example of you can, go and fix a bad fence where there's a cow getting out every day for all summer or whatever, or you spend an hour or whatever it is 3 times a week doing that, and then you can take all that time with a little bit of investment and build a whole new fence, and
Yeah.
you can put the cows there, and you don't have to go back. You can go fishing or go whatever you want to do.
Right.
Um, so it's just an example of how you would make the system better, more secure, so that it would more operate itself, I guess. But
Absolutely.
being able to spend more time with my kids or take them where or whatever. I mean, they'd probably want to buy. My daughter would want to buy more horses, and my son wants to buy more quads. So, I guess that would probably end up on the list too, likely. But yeah,
Yeah. Awesome. That's so cool. Yeah, improve the practices on the farm just to give you more time. That's kind of like an ongoing theme here is not having enough time. So
yep,
whatever money you can put in so that that gives you more free time.
yep, and we can see that in our you keep, and we've acquired land, and over the years just all those things add up where and I mean we've tried to renovate some fence or those kind of projects or equipment, whatever it is that is causing stress or taking time. We try to move them, kind of like we were recently we're processing cattle all the time, and we're able to run, you know we did 450 calves through our handling. We took them off the cow, run them through our facility, and process them the way we needed to prior to weaning all in one day. And I mean, we've probably been a lot of years keep changing and adapting those handling facilities to make that. And you don't realize that you've got to that point where you can handle that many cattle. So it works good because you can do more in one day. We have to get outside help for those days, and alleviates the need of family members taking time off work or whatever to come and help you when you can do that much and you don't feel wore out at the end of the day because the system
Exactly.
works. Those kind of things are overlooked, I think, and you don't take time to stop and realize um, that hey, we've spent a lot of time and effort changing and building things, but look, it is finally paying off.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Are you working on any current projects right now or anything you're excited for in the future?
Um, I guess this um, our handling facility, we have a feedlot area, so we're trying to get it you know uh, changed or to make it more convenient, those kind of things. Um, and probably the more the regenerative ag or dual cropping, those kind of things is probably the excitement thing. It's also a frustration, I guess. Um, Trying to find out what's going to work there. We've had adverse weather the last couple of years that haven't been seeing the full potential out of it, but that's something that's new and I think shows a lot of potential for some of the things we're doing here for running yearlings or whatever later season productivity. Um, is being able to run cows out longer without feed. Those kind of things are that's always been something we strive for. But when you come across something that maybe there hasn't been much new added to the toolbox for a long time, um, that's something I think that is intriguing currently. That hopefully will give us some benefits of those few things in the future.
Right. And the past couple years have been very extreme opposites for weather in terms of it being so dry last year and then this past year being so wet. Did you implement some sort of plans in terms of what crops you were going to do this year based on how dry it was last year, and then it kind of backfired at all because you had so much moisture? Or did you run into any things that you had planned last spring and it just didn't pan out how you had thought?
Yeah, like last year was such a struggle. Um, and we managed to find enough feed resources farther from home or home, and you know able to cut lowlands more so to find feed or those resources, those kind of things. And yeah, the regenerative last year we had tried several different dual crop, and you're going to harvest it early and then have fall grazing, and I mean there was just nothing. We were lucky to get much of a yield, in our silage or whatever we harvested, or grazed it the first time. There just was no regrowth later in the year. So this year we plan to, do some more of that, and we were really wet in the spring, so that delayed our seeding on some of those things, unfortunately. So just because of that, and then we turned so dry late in the year that we run into the same situation that we didn't get the regrowth on some of these things as we'd hoped, because we, didn't get weren't able to get the crop seeded quick enough
Yeah.
initially to allow enough days of growth in between, and being so dry in the fall. But this year probably showed us, the potential. The plants were there, they were alive, they were growing when we harvested the first whatever we were doing the first time,
Hmm.
whether we grazed it or silaged it, but it just didn't have the timeline or the moisture to really produce much of anything. There was growth there, but not really harvestable. And if you'd have grazed it, you would have left the land pretty bare after. But it showed us the potential of what you can at least get the plants growing and established. Is just to try to get them to have enough growth time to make something.
Right. Interesting. So even though it's even two different factors, but similar things, not getting enough regrowth. When it's too dry, you don't get the regrowth, but then when it's too wet, it's too late to seed to get a proper regrowth
For
necessarily.
sure. I mean, yep.
Yeah.
So we changed, like this year we grew sorghum that we chop for silage. So I guess it's maybe a good and bad thing. But I mean, the one thing in our operation, we put in a lot of feed this year, just because we were so short last year. And it didn't really backfire. It worked out well. We have lots of feed,
Nice.
but we certainly would have, knowing how we ended up, we would have left, we would have harvested less as silage and maybe left some to swath graze or whatever. And I mean, we would have put probably a little more into cash crops, if we knew that the feed yield was, not that having extra feed's a bad thing, but it's a year down the road before you recoup the cost out of it.
Right.
You have storage concerns, all that kind of stuff. We would have had maybe more annual crops in, just as a cash flow. Economics, it's all got to work together to make the place operate.
Yeah.
So having extra fees is not a bad thing, but we could have, had a little less, and had some more income, I guess, uh, would be the offset of that. But that's all in all, we're certainly happier, more relaxed this year than we were, last year for feed stuff. And when it's wet, we were extremely wet. We also lose, acres due to overland flooding, which we lost quite a few. So we were early in the year. That's why we're also planting extra feed, because we looked like we were going to be short of hay and pasture, because we had a lot of
Right.
pasture land that was also flooded.
Right.
Um, but it did. The water did start to recede by fall, and we did find some other feed stuff, some straw and whatnot, that we're going to use to. And then we were able to cut some of those areas. It was quite late. It's not, high quality feed, but it is roughage feed that cows will can eat. So we were lucky enough there to still get some feedstuffs off that land. So it'll all in all, it worked out, and we're still in a way better situation than we were, the previous year.
Good. That's good. Okay. My last question here is my little I've been asking everybody this. If you could tell something to somebody who's never farmed before and doesn't have any experience, what would you tell them where to start?
Huh. Well, like I said, some days I'd say just run, don't go near it.
Don't start.
But that's, I'm glad nobody told me that,
Yeah.
when I was younger, because, we've made it this far.
Yeah.
So, um, I guess it's in this day and age, uh, it's probably not a tough question, but I mean, um, searching somebody, that's like-minded to help them on their journey. Young agrarians as an example, but it's people maybe through less physical meeting and connection nowadays with social media, and let's admit it, coming out of COVID and everything was restricted. Finding those people that are legitimately looking for somebody to educate them, but agriculture's alive and well and real, and the world needs it. So I'd encourage anybody to ask, investigate, don't be scared. Most farmers are nice; they'll talk your ear off if you let them have a chance, um, and they're willing to share, what we're doing and what we're still learning and adapting to, and open and willing to share that with those who have, they think food comes to the grocery store.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
more than willing to open up and invite them in, and those kind of things are, it's just to make that connection somehow.
Right. That's a good answer. That's great. Okay. I want to wrap up the session with just sharing some resources for our listeners and where they can hear more about you and your journey. Do you guys have social media or like a newsletter, a website, anything like
We have
that?
a Facebook page that I think that my niece or nephew periodically add to.
Okay, cool. So yeah,
And
on Facebook
yep,
and
other than that, we're
Instagram, you
pretty low
think?
key.
Okay.
Yes, I think they also on there. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. So yeah, and so that's Poplarview Stock Farm for those listening. If you guys want to follow along and see some pictures of their farm, and if you want to know more about their farm and the others that were in the program on our website holisticmanagement.com, we'll be sharing their story as well as this podcast, and you can find more links on how to support farmers, just like Trevor here. So thanks so much for coming on here and sharing your story with us.
No problem at all. I enjoyed it.
Awesome. Okay. Take care.
You betcha. Okay, Bronwyn.
To learn more about holistic management, regenerative farming principles, and the farms in Manitoba that are implementing these practices, check out our Instagram and Facebook page or visit our website at holisticmanagement.ca, and make sure to sign up to our newsletter so we can let you know about all the upcoming events and learning opportunities in your area. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to discuss in the future on this podcast, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. For our soil's sake, thanks for listening in, everyone.